guest on today's episode is Amber Schatz, the host and producer of Studio 701, which is a lifestyle show featuring topics and guests, of which I happen to be one. That's how I met her in the first place. All about North Dakota. 701 is our area code, and she has a lighthearted and uplifting take on what will make our lives better. So I invited Amber on to talk about how she came up with the show, kind of the genesis of all of that. But then we dovetail into a pretty good discussion about the role that media plays in general. And then further, for those of us living in small towns, what we can do to get our stories and our voices amplified. She gives some really clear advice how to do that. And really, it's just one of the things I think about a lot. We aren't necessarily in control of the narrative in the larger media. So I wanted to know what we could do to take control back. So enjoy this chat with my new friend, Amber Schatz. Well, welcome, Amber, to the Growing Small Town Show. So happy to have you with us.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I just got the chance to be on your show, and it's just great experience. And I just think it's always fun to have people on that have done something. This is very specific. The thing that you have done, Studio 701, is very, very niche. But you grew up in a really small town. I think as a journalist, there's a lot you can share with us. So why don't you just start by telling us the story? Tell us a bit about your background. I'll jump in and ask questions. But how did Studio 701 really come to be?
Sure, yeah. So I'm from a very small town, New England, North Dakota. I want to just give a big shout out to them because I would not choose any other way of growing up than in a small town. Love my childhood. Population 500 some, and that's in Western North Dakota. Very small. I went to UND, went to majored in communications. Did my first internship with a TV station there called Studio One at the time, which is kind of funny because now I'm at Studio 701. But that was, I'm not going to say almost 20 years ago, but it's
okay.
It's crazy. Time has flown. But so that's where I got the TV bug. The love of TV was during that internship with the TV station. And what I did at the internship, they had different roles for people to do, like reporters and photographers, editors, producers, everything you'll see in an actual news station, and anchors, sports, weather, everything. But I was, what was the name of my title? Talent coordinator. So
cool.
I never heard that. And, I only got to do the internship for one semester and then I graduated. I wished I could have stayed in school longer to continue the internship because I enjoyed it so much.
Sure.
But what I would do was call people, guests that they would have on the show, and kind of pre-interview them, find out what's something interesting they can talk about on the show so that the anchors could interview them on air. And I would ask the questions in the anchor's ear, in their earpiece, and tell them what to ask the guest. And it was so funny because I remember even thinking at the time, I don't think real news stations do this because, usually I think the anchor comes up with the questions themselves, or maybe the producer and something. But it definitely helps having that extra person kind of watching and filling in gaps where you might not think of something really obvious. So that is where I got my TV bug.
What is that like for an anchor to have people chatting in their ear all the time? Like, you have to acquire that skill, I would assume, right? Like, how do you stay present with the person sitting in front of you? And also, I don't really get that, to be honest. I'm being brutally honest. I have inside chatter. There's always stuff going on in my own head, but I also have other voices. Like, how do people do that?
Yeah, that is really hard. And it definitely takes time and getting used to. And you were so right. I have my own inner voices as well, but I also have a voice in my head all the time named Seth, who is telling me time cues, stuff that's going on that I need to know. They try to keep it as quick and as possible. But, almost every minute, they at least give you a time cue and let you know when to wrap up. And it is a little bit hard, but you just kind of learn to listen when the person is talking, accept what they're telling you, and don't lose your connection with the person who's telling you a conversation.
Right.
It takes practice, just like anything. It really does.
Yeah.
What I feel bad is when we're in a commercial break and I'm trying to connect to someone who's live in the studio, they don't hear that someone else is talking to me and they're like telling me a story. And I'm kind of nodding to both people, both the camera, so my director sees, and the other person. But yeah, it's an acquired skill. It takes practice.
Yeah, I bet. And I'm sure you've had guests over like throughout your whole career where you ask a question and they don't really give you enough substance and then you're like having to rap, and I'm sure that's just really hard. I would struggle so hard with that. Like this podcast, we just get to talk until we feel like being done, right? Like that's probably why this venue works for me. I don't know that I could do that. Has that happened where the guest just doesn't give you anything and then you have to basically wrap their segment up?
You have people who will talk that you'll ask one question and they'll talk for 5 minutes straight.
Yeah, that's me.
Trying to cut in. No, you were fantastic. Perfect match, I'd say. And then, on the other end, you'll have someone who gives you a one-word answer. And that's where you're like, oh boy, this is going to be a long 5 minutes. So it's amazing how much that amount of time can either go really quickly or take a really long time. But, I think overall it's just, and I'm sure with you on your podcast too, you want your guests to look good. You want to look good. You want it to go well. So a lot of that happens in the pre-interview and getting to know them, getting to talk with them and lifting them up to help them succeed in what they're going to say. So we always go over what 3 points they want to make. And so, even if they're giving a one-word answer, we definitely are always, asking as open-ended questions as we can.
Sure.
But even when they're not getting to what they've told you they want to make sure to mention, then you just kind of keep leading into that to hopefully get them to go. But a couple segments have had to end a little early. And that's okay because, the viewer, I think, can pick up on that too, that this is dragged out and we don't want to do that. So that's, we got through everything we wanted to and it's ending a little early and that's okay.
Yeah. Well, and for me, with this kind of a platform, I think constantly about the listener, right? Like, what do the people that listen to the show, what do they care about? And that obviously that dictates who we ask to come on and the kinds of things that we share. And so I can always keep them in the back of my mind. And they now know me. So they know that we go on tangents. They know that things don't stay tight and scripted, and they're totally cool with that. But it's definitely different. Like you would think our worlds are kind of similar, and there's probably a lot of overlap. But in other ways, they're just really, really different. And I just think journalism is a really cool field. So Studio 701, you kind of told us your history and your background. How did all of this come to be?
So with Studio 701, I just feel like I should preface that I worked for Schatz News as a reporter and a producer and a news anchor for almost, I think it was about 9 years. And I ended up leaving after I had my first child to stay at home with my daughter, Daisy. So
beautiful name.
Oh, thank you.
That's sweet.
I ended up leaving for a while. And a big part of that was the hours. When you work at a news station, you're either working very early or very late, or you're a reporter, which is a very entry-level position. And you might have better hours, but you're also expected to be able to go to things at the drop of a hat. And an entry-level position, it's a very hard position. Being a reporter, I think, is the hardest job there is. So when I left, I loved doing what I did, but I also wanted to be a mom for a while and kind of figured that out. And when I talked with KX, they were about to launch, or they wanted to launch a lifestyle show. So that is what Studio 701 is. They actually consider it completely different than news in that it's lifestyle, which just means that it basically focuses on everything that impacts our lives in the 701. And, it's a lot more lighthearted for sure. Mm-hmm. And we get to kind of pick segments that are geared more toward our audience from the 9 to 10 a.m. hour, Monday through Friday.
Who is your audience, Amber?
Well, that's what's so interesting about COVID and adapting we've all had to do is we actually had a bigger audience because of that, because so many more people are working from home.
Right.
And so that's moms, dads, and all ages, kids, everyone. So as people are getting back a little bit more to normal, that might be shifting a little bit, but we hear from all ages.
Okay.
And we're still figuring that out. We've only been on air since September.
Oh, I didn't actually know it was that new. Cool. That's really cool. But I think what an interesting time to launch something like this.
Yes. And it's been a learning experience. It has been so fun. I feel like we get to put on a variety show almost daily.
Yeah.
Some of the things we're dealing with that are behind the scenes, like one day I just remember laughing because I'm like, if people knew that we're like, wait, what chair can Clark the Lark's butt fit into because he's wearing this big costume that's from a baseball team here in Bismarck? And we're like, his butt's not going to fit in that chair.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Trying to figure out those little things to make sure that everything goes smoothly and works is a lot of fun.
I think it's a really fun show. Like but I like pop culture. Like I find that kind of interesting. And I don't know that I'm not an expert on any of that stuff, but like you guys reviewed a movie and I giggled like the whole time. By the way, watching that was really funny. Like your poor co-anchor, Caitlin, she just got really beat up. they were like, no, we don't dig this one. And it was funny. But I do think that I personally, as a woman who has 3 kids, news, there's air quotes around that for our listeners. They can't see me, but it's so cynical. It makes everybody I know and love and care about, like if we're watching just straight up news, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, that's not the point, but it makes everybody angry. And for me, like, I think it's nice to know that there's somebody trying really hard to create something that is uplifting and lighthearted. And because I cannot perseverate in that world. How do you feel about that? Having been a journalist, do you feel like news has changed over let's even just take the last decade? And if so, in what ways? And like, what's your take on it? What do you think?
Very much so. I mean, it's changed in the last 3 years, compared to when I left to today and the requirements and this is just at this station that I'm at right now, but everything is about digital leading first, everything being Facebook Live and who can get it on there first. And it's so much more of a race than it was kind of when I was doing news, which we did a lot of social media then too, but nothing like today. What I would say about content wise is the second I became a mom, I no longer wanted to report on things the awful things happening that are reported on every day in local news. The murders, the crime, the politics,
right.
The things that are so divisive. It just no longer was anything I had any interest in. I just wanted to focus on what was important to me, which was my family. And so I'm glad I got that little break, to be honest with you.
Sure.
And then, as a stay-at-home mom for a year, I watched morning TV and I got to know what I like to watch too.
Right.
And it wasn't that stuff. It wasn't the politics and the awfulness. It was laughing about someone talking about a movie.
Right.
So I feel like in helping to create Studio 701, which we are so lucky that we get the freedom that we do. Not every TV station is like that, to let us kind of figure out what is working, what we like as hosts. And I'm the producer as well. So
Okay.
I've had some freedom in getting to do that and make what I would want to watch, which has been just a joy.
So 2 things. I want to go back to, there's a couple of things that have changed, right? One is the vehicle, kind of, I guess we'll call it the vehicle, or the avenues through which the news is reported, which digital. I want to ask a couple questions about that. But then there's content, right? Both of those things has really changed the landscape of news, I think. So my question about, this race, like you said, so there's a race. There's a race to who puts it out first. Do you think that, I'm just going to ask the question and I don't know how diplomatic you'll have to be, but that's on you to decide. But do you think that along with that, there's a hastiness and a lack of quality in the thoroughness of how those things get reported because it's all about the race to get it out first?
I mean, you definitely hope not. You hope everyone's doing their due diligence and fact checking what they're getting out there. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that's definitely happened across the board, local and national. I think specifically at KX, I can't speak, but I know that we have a digital team who puts being accurate, at the forefront. And I think team being the key word, and that's something that has grown here. And I think that's important that it has, because a team is looking over something together, not just one person just kind of quickly getting something out there as much as they can. So
the other thing that goes along with this is how much news is crowdsourced from viewers. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting thing that didn't exist 10 years ago, right? Where like we literally, you think of some of the big things that have happened even in 2020, it was just such a traumatic year in so many ways. So much of what gets shared first is some video that some random person on the street took with their phone. So is there now like an entire division with and again, I get we're in North Dakota and like our scope of what we're talking about is maybe different, but as a journalist, I just think these are interesting questions. You're the first journalist I've had on the show. And I think I think that there's, so again, we serve small town audiences, typically rural people through our show. And I think the media and news in general has created a ton of problems for us, not just those of us in rural America, but like it's just made the divide worse, right? So now I'm questioning, like, is there an entire news team that what they do is they just pour through are people just every day submitting stuff like, hey, check this out? And that's got to be really overwhelming to manage. And maybe not. Like maybe I really don't know how any of this works, Amber. That's why I'm asking the questions. But
I'd say maybe the comments can be a little overwhelming.
Right. Yeah. Oh gosh.
Made, and I'd say that most people know actually this is going to get probably a pretty negative reaction from a lot of people. I mean, that's they see day in, day out.
Yeah.
And knowing what to like allow and what not to allow. But as far as videos from small towns and everything, that is something I would encourage is for people living in small towns to send in your video to the news team. Because you might be surprised how if they get the video, they get the information. I mean, when we're talking about weather, I know, whenever there's anything crazy happening weather-wise, you send it to the weather team, they put it on air. Right. Because they want to be able to show everyone what's happening in small towns. Same thing with, a great last-minute point scored in a basketball game that someone got up in the stands. I mean, those are my favorite kind of stories. And you send that in, you might think, oh, they probably won't care. You would be surprised. I mean, it's mostly just a matter of finding the right person to send it to, and then a little bit of information and like, hey, if you want any more, I'll follow up with you. You would be surprised. Because the hardest thing is people working in news, it's obviously hard to cover an entire state. And with the resources, that are not endless, and not being able to go to every small town and, cover everything. So send that in. You might be surprised as it gets on the news that night.
Yeah, I don't think the average person in a small town, I don't think we think about this.
Right.
I really don't. I mean, and that's, so, part of what I was hoping, and we're talking about it now, is just like, what can we do more of? Maybe control the narrative, right? Like, the only reason people think the way they think about small towns is because we're not telling the story. We're not saying, but that's not how it is. So that's an opportunity for all of us, don't you think? I mean, really, there's cool things happening in my community and in the communities around me every day.
It definitely helps having a connection with someone who works at a news station who's maybe from the area.
Yeah.
Anything that's New England or Southwest North Dakota, I was like, oh yeah, I know that place. And oh yeah, you got to go there and get that video. So awesome. So it definitely helps having someone, an ally, if you will, who knows where you're at and knows the value of what you're talking about. But yes, absolutely. People in small towns need to realize, the same thing can be said about Bismarck or Fargo. Can I just say, like, right. We are in a smaller news market, technically.
Yep.
So, we're considered small news. Small towns are considered even smaller, but it doesn't matter what market you're in. It doesn't matter the size of the town. We're always trying to do the best quality story we can do, regardless, here or Minneapolis. So reach out with your idea. Like, I'm just telling you, reach out, send it in. They will love you for it. They're always looking for content. They're always looking for story ideas. And, the stories that I can do the best as someone in a lifestyle show are the heartwarming ones.
Right.
Especially after everything we've been through. People have become overwhelmed, I think, with all the negativity. And so you have this heartwarming story and suddenly everybody is just like sharing it and it blows up. We have a librarian here locally, Miss Sparkles, who went around during the pandemic and left signs in kids' yards saying, "You're a great reader." And took a picture waving from their yard. And it went, locally viral because people just love seeing positivity like that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what's so special about what you are doing. I mean, you're making a choice And again, I'm thinking about my dad right now. And so my dad, when my mom and I would rather watch like the Today Show with the lifestyle segments than like the news, he always says, so again, as a journalist, I would love your take on this, that I have a due diligence to know what's going on in the world. He would tell me that, right? I don't necessarily disagree, but how do I balance that out with my mental well-being? Like, I'm serious. How do you do that? I mean, how do you do that for yourself? How do you stay informed and aware without getting completely sucked down into despair over it all?
I like to joke how I'm like, I'm in Studio 701 land, because that is what I do at work all day.
Yeah.
Trying to a wormhole about politics or whatever is happening at the moment. That's just it. You get sucked into it.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's what you want to do with your time, you can do that.
Sure.
When I'm choosing not to do that with my time, that's because I don't really want to. And to be honest, I'm producing the show. As fun as it is and everything, it takes a lot of work. It's a lot of coordinating with people's schedules and coming up with solutions for who can be on the show on Monday and whatnot. So I focus on that when I'm at work, and when I'm at home, I focus on my family. Obviously, having due diligence of what's going on in the world, absolutely. How do you consume your news? For me, I usually check Twitter. And
really?
See what's kind of trending.
It's so icky. It's such an icky place to be. Like, at least that's, again, is like my experience. But maybe give us some tips on like how you manage it. So you check that's what your big thing is to check what's trending.
Yeah, I usually see what's trending, and kind of, all you see really is something is trending and why it's trending, what the headline is. And if I choose to like go into it more, I will. And if not, I just move on with my life and kind of know that's what's happening. And then my husband and I will talk at the end of the day. Okay, how was your day? How was your day? Okay, what's going on in the world today? Like, because my whole day has gone by and I hadn't heard anything. The other reason is I happen to be right next to the office of the digital team. So I will hear stuff on occasion, going on that's pretty big that they're covering as well.
Sure.
So, I think we've had a psychologist on our show. She was one of my favorite guests. She was so funny, by the way. She's a neuropsychologist, hilarious. She's so great. And that was always her message. She's like, you are choosing how you want to spend your time. And when you realize how it's making you feel, then maybe you don't want to spend your time that way. If it's making you feel a negative way. About how often we're looking at our phones, and not even news, but just social media in general. Mm-hmm. When you're, scrolling on Facebook too long, and then suddenly you start to not feel so good. And then she just had such, it sounds so simple, but such great advice about that.
It's so important though. I mean, because that's, I think, again, did you watch The Social Dilemma by chance, the Netflix documentary? I watched it and it just terrified me. I'm like, I don't want to be anybody's pawn. Like right away, I just got all fired up. Like, this is not okay. And I've got my son will be 12 in just a couple weeks. And, we're getting into that age where I actually think he may be one of the only kids like of his friend group that doesn't have a phone.
Oh, uh-huh.
And so, that's a huge discussion of concern in our household. But it's the idea that it actually changes and rewires your brain. If you can't step back and say, oh my gosh, I'm being like, I can feel it, but I'm a 40-year-old woman, right? Like I've lived some time and I didn't grow up with it, and it wasn't hardwired into my brain from birth like it is with our kids. It's kind of terrifying. But I will constantly remind my kids of that too. Like, this is with everything, where we put our attention, we get to control where we give what things we give our attention to. And if it starts to make you feel bad about yourself, then look somewhere else, And that's where I think the news thing, it makes me so sad when I see otherwise just really great people getting so like mired down in it that they're cynical and angry and upset all the time. And I don't know. I think I love it. So you said your days look like this. You go to work and you focus on your work. So at that moment, that's your worldview. Then when you go home, you focus on your kids. That's your worldview. Like, we all have the ability to influence a lot, but we don't have to take on the entire world's problems, I don't think either. I don't know.
It's hard. I mean,
super hard.
Everything that you could ever want is right here.
Yeah.
And so how do you not look at that
On
and
your phone. I'm just saying that because you showed it to me and our listeners can't see you. But yes, it's crazy, isn't it?
It's like saying, okay, so like, a kid in a candy shop, but it's like that for everyone, adults and kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so, necessary. And like I said, that neuropsychologist we had on the show really opened up my eyes. The first time we had her on, I think, was to talk about that movie, The Social Dilemma. And
really? Okay.
That.
Yep.
And it was just so interesting. And I just tried to be more conscious of it and my use of it. And you know how you have that setting that lets you know how much you're on your phone and everything.
Yep.
And for me, it is hand in hand with how much I'm on my phone, how much I'm looking at things that don't make me feel great, or, like politics, divisive stuff.
Right.
So,
well, what's crazy is even uplifting stuff can make you feel bad if it starts to make you feel discontentment.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, really, like there's so many triggers that we have to just continue to be aware of, I think. Oh, it's so hard. Well, it's super fun to have met you. I believe in journalism. Like I believe in the importance and the value of journalism. Sometimes I worry that we've gone down a road that we're never going to get back to just full integrity of it. Not here in North Dakota so much. I mean, but just on a bigger scale, it just seems, I don't know. Sometimes it seems kind of depressing.
It's tough. I have limited how I consume my news, but I go to the places that I trust the most. And I work for a CBS network, and I have you have even not only the show that you prefer, but even the journalist that you prefer.
Right.
So I would say, find someone that you like and someone that you trust and someone that you think has credibility, and check out what they have to say, and don't get too bogged down by it.
Right. If you can. Well, what you guys are doing at Studio 701, being a 701 resident, I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate the fact that it's meant to be kind of the antithesis of hard-hitting news, because I just think we don't, and I think this is a small town thing. It's probably in Fargo, Bismarck, or bigger communities too. We just don't celebrate enough. Like there's so many things to just celebrate. And so the fact that you're focusing on those good things is a gift to all of us.
That makes me so happy to hear, honestly, Rebecca. And, we have our National Day calendar featured every day, which his whole thing is celebrate every day. And so then we show whatever March 26th is today.
Yeah.
I think it's Irish Heritage Day or something.
Usually they're random, like the random holidays, but that's kind of fun, right? There's a spirit of that. Like, every day we're going to celebrate something.
Yeah. So we love showing that. We love getting to talk about that. Whenever it's a food item, we try to bring it on the show and talk about that. But we start every show with, we hope you're having a great day, and then we can make it even better. Yeah. And we really mean that. So, the feedback I've gotten from viewers is, thank you for not talking about politics. Thank you for not talking about this or that, these negative things. I get so much joy. I smile when I watch you guys. Like that makes my heart just glow. I'm so happy to hear that. And especially through the tough past year, I think we've all gone through. This is what so many people need, is connecting in a positive way and laughing, smiling, enjoying each other. So
I will say this, we will be sure to link to Studio 701 and make sure everybody can find you. And this is kind of a free pass to our viewers in North Dakota specifically to send stuff into you. Yeah? You want to hear, I mean, I got on your show because you had another guest and she recommended me. So that's the thing, is we are really good at crowdsourcing good stuff, I think, in North Dakota. So now we just need to send it your way, right? So you can feature some of these people.
People who know me know I love small town. Like I said, I talk about mine all the time. And so I know the amazing stories happening in small towns that are not being told.
Right.
Please send them our way. That might be as simple as that, and we'll get you on the show. And with the power of technology, one positive thing to come out of COVID.
This is right.
Everyone can Zoom. So it can be as simple as that. And having you on the show, which the Ben Franklin story, I mean, that's so awesome. And especially the 40-year day difference with your grandparents. I mean, that was just so cool. It's so
special. I mean, like anybody that ever cared about anybody is like, that's special. And I'm like, I know it is. So it was really fun. I had a great time on your show. You guys are doing great work. So thank you again for being a guest with us, and hopefully we'll get to be on each other's shows again down the road. That would be really fun.
Let's keep in touch for sure. Thank you.
Sounds good. You bet. So there you have it. If you live in a small town and you want your voices heard, reach out to your local media outlet and share something. Share a story, share an article, share a video, share a blog post. We just need to take control of the stories and the amazing things happening every single day in our small towns. If you enjoyed this chat with Amber, be sure to check out her Fast 5, where you can learn a bit more about her as she answers 5 random questions that I ask. And you can get her Fast 5 by going to growing.smalltowns.org/fast5, enter your email address, and you will get Amber's Fast 5 along with all the other previous guests' Fast 5s as well. And so until I get to hear another story from all of you about your small town, please keep doing what you can with what you have right where you're at to help grow yourself and your small town. We'll see you soon.